Power does not bend to sentiment. It recognizes only strength, calculation, and the perception of inevitability. Compassion may soften the heart of the private man, but for the ruler it is a weakness that invites predation. To govern is not to be loved, nor to be feared alone, but to master the delicate theater where appearances decide reality. A ruler who surrenders to emotion exposes his flanks to rivals who do not. The world is a stage of wolves, and wolves do not respect tears. They respect the shadow of authority, the certainty that consequences will follow disobedience, and the belief that resistance is futile. Perception must become your armor, compassion your dagger used sparingly, only when it strengthens rather than undermines. Men pledge loyalty in words but betray in silence. They obey not because they are convinced of your virtue, but because they sense your hand upon the lever of consequence. They must believe you are both closer than a friend and more distant than a god, reachable in presence, untouchable in authority. To rule is to embody contradiction without revealing the fracture. Detach emotion, for it clouds the judgment of the ambitious. Anger blinds, mercy weakens, love corrupts, fear overwhelms, but perception, carefully crafted, bends them all into service. A ruler does not reveal his true self. He constructs a mask that others mistake for truth. And when they bow to that mask, they bow to his power. The state is not held together by compassion. It is held by the silent pact of fear, the expectation of reward, and the unspoken acceptance that the alternative is chaos. The crowd does not seek truth, it seeks certainty. The ruler must embody certainty, even when torn by doubt, even when weakened by loss, even when standing alone against betrayal. Appearances are stronger than reality. Men will believe what they see repeated, what they hear whispered, what they fear is inevitable. The ruler who understands this does not fight for the purity of truth, but for the mastery of perception. For perception directs armies, secures loyalty, and sustains power long after the flame of compassion burns out. Therefore, do not seek to rule hearts through kindness. Rule minds through perception. Command loyalty through fear of disobedience. Grant mercy only when it sharpens obedience. Let the people speak of your strength, your inevitability, your iron hand wrapped in a velvet glove. For in politics, compassion dies quickly, but perception endures. Detach emotion, and you will not be ruled by the world. Shape perception, and the world will be ruled by you. Detach emotion, for emotion is a leash the world fastens around the neck of the ambitious. It is the invisible chain by which rivals pull you into traps, the soft whisper by which flatterers bend your judgment, the corrosive poison that makes a ruler mistake weakness for virtue. To rule is to refuse the chain, to break the leash, to step beyond the reach of those who weaponize sentiment. A ruler must watch with clear eyes, not clouded by sympathy or resentment, but sharpened by necessity. He must see the betrayal before it takes shape, the discontent before it erupts, the hunger for his throne before it devours him. Compassion, when unmeasured, is a liability that leaves scars upon the state. The subjects will take your mercy as habit, not as grace. They will consume it until it becomes their entitlement. And when you withdraw it, they will call you cruel, though they were the ones who transformed your kindness into their chain. A ruler cannot afford to give freely what must be rationed with intent. Mercy is not a river, it is a well, and if you allow all to drink without restraint, it will run dry before the drought is over. Compassion must be wielded like the sword, drawn with precision, withdrawn with discipline, offered only when it strengthens the throne, never when it undermines it. Perception is the true instrument of command. Men do not follow because they have inspected your soul. They follow because they believe what they see and fear what they imagine. They need the illusion of certainty more than the substance of truth. They need to believe that you do not waver, that your will is iron, that your face does not tremble before the storm. Even when doubt corrodes you from within, the mask must remain untarnished. To rule is to live behind that mask, to craft it so perfectly that even you begin to believe in its solidity. The ruler must be both actor and director in the theater of power. He He writes the script of appearances, he casts the roles of allies and enemies, he sets the stage where the people watch and judge. The crowd is fickle, their loyalty is the applause of the moment, easily won, easily lost. But applause can be guided, manipulated, orchestrated. They may turn against you in silence, but if you keep their eyes occupied, if you keep their mouths repeating your name, their hands will not move against you. Fear, when carefully measured, is more enduring than love. Love is conditional, fragile, shifting with fortune. Fear is rooted in instinct, a reflex that does not negotiate. Yet fear must never be absolute. Absolute fear breeds desperation, and desperation sparks rebellion. The ruler must calculate the balance. Enough fear to deter, enough reward to soothe, enough perception of strength to prevent the thought of defiance. It is not cruelty that sustains power. It is the certainty that cruelty is possible and the unpredictability of when it will strike. Loyalty, in its rawest form, is nothing but the alignment of interests. Men serve when service serves themselves. They betray when betrayal promises greater gain. Few will bleed for ideals, fewer still for rulers, but all will move according to the currents of self-interest. The wise ruler does not curse this truth, he exploits it. He ensures that loyalty and self-interest become indistinguishable, so that to betray him is to betray oneself. In this lies the true art of control, not to demand loyalty, but to structure reality so that disloyalty is unthinkable. Ambition, both yours and theirs, is the current that drives the state. Your ambition must outpace theirs, or theirs will consume yours. The throne is never still. It shifts beneath you like a raft on turbulent waters. To remain in command, you must continually readjust, continually anticipate, continually suppress the ambitions that rise too close to your own. To underestimate ambition is to invite exile or death. To master it is to ensure that every other's hunger feeds your feast, not consumes it. Betrayal is the constant companion of power. Trust is a luxury, loyalty a convenience, faithfulness a rare accident. The ruler who believes he is loved without condition is already doomed. He must assume betrayal always waits, clothed in the guise of friendship, whispered in the tongue of devotion, disguised in the face of service. He must not hate betrayal, it is simply the law of survival transposed into human affairs. He must prepare for it, counter it, and, when necessary, perform it himself with greater skill than those who would dare practice it upon him. Survival is the first and last commandment of leadership. States collapse, thrones fall, armies break, but the ruler who survives retains the chance to rebuild. To rule is not to seek permanence, for permanence does not exist. It is to endure longer than rivals, to remain standing when all others fall. This endurance requires the suppression of emotion, the mastery of perception, the harnessing of loyalty, the anticipation of betrayal. It requires the cold recognition that politics is not a moral theater, but a stage where necessity plays the leading role. Detach emotion, rule through perception, not compassion, for compassion is fleeting, but perception is eternal. The ruler who understands this becomes more than a man. He becomes an institution, a force, a shadow that outlives the flesh. And in this shadow lies the only immortality politics will ever grant. Strength lies not in the weight of armies alone, but in the architecture of appearances that command obedience before the first blade is drawn. Men fight less for reality than for the illusions they are made to believe. A ruler who can shape those illusions need not always draw blood. He conquers by conviction, bends wills without chains, and instills obedience without the whip. Yet he must never confuse the mask with the face. The mask is a tool, the face is irrelevant. The state does not care who you are, it only cares what you seem to be, and how long that appearance can be sustained. The human heart is a battlefield of desires, fears, and jealousies. Those who rule must navigate it with the patience of a hunter and the precision of a surgeon. They must know when to ignite desire, when to stoke fear, when to flatter pride, when to silence doubt. Each man carries within him a weakness, and the ruler's art is to discover it and bind it to his service. Some can be bound by gold, others by honor, others by terror, and others by ambition. To treat all men alike is folly. To read each one with cold clarity is necessity. The crowd, vast and faceless, is more predictable than the individual. It seeks bread, it seeks spectacle, it seeks order over chaos. A ruler who delivers these things, or appears to, will be upheld even as he strips away freedom piece by piece. They will praise his firmness. They will cling to his image of stability. They will prefer his chain to the uncertainty of disorder. Thus, the crowd must be entertained, pacified, distracted, and contained, but never trusted. Trusting the multitude is to lean on water for support. Every ruler stands upon a foundation of fear and hope, yet fear is the stone, and hope is the sand. Hope shifts with fortune, but fear endures through time. To remove fear is to loosen the stone until the structure collapses. Yet a wise ruler does not announce cruelty. He lets the threat linger unspoken, the possibility always present, the memory of punishment strong enough to echo in silence. A single act of decisive severity can prevent the need for 1,000 smaller punishments. One display of ruthlessness, strategically placed, writes a warning that endures long after the act itself is forgotten. In the council chamber, deception must be your servant. Speak truth when it suits you, conceal it when it does not, and always let others believe they understand less than they truly do. Transparency is a luxury of the powerless. The ruler must live within layers, some visible, some hidden, some entirely false. Allies must think they glimpse his heart. Enemies must think they read his mind, but none must ever know what truly guides him. In this theater of shadows, the one who reveals least rules most. Fate is never absent from the calculations of power. Fortune grants and withdraws her favor with no warning. She lifts men to the height of thrones and casts them down into the dust of exile. The ruler cannot control fortune, but he can prepare for her turns. He can build structures resilient enough to absorb her blows, armies disciplined enough to recover her losses, perceptions strong enough to outlast her storms. He must adapt as rivers change course, as seasons shift, as the tides rise and fall. To resist fortune blindly is ruin. To anticipate her is survival. Exile is the crucible where the true measure of ambition is tested. Stripped of court, stripped of honors, stripped of titles, a ruler in exile learns whether he was sustained by appearance alone or whether he carries within him the seed of return. Many vanish in bitterness, but some rise stronger from the ashes, learning that power can be rebuilt, allies remade, fortunes reversed. Exile teaches that the throne is not the source of power, it is merely its seat. Power resides in will, in cunning, in the ability to command belief even when stripped of all visible authority. War, whether fought with armies or with words, is the natural state of rulers. Peace is but the pause between campaigns, the stage upon which intrigues are plotted and preparations made. To rule is to be at war constantly with rivals, with discontent, with betrayal, with fate itself. The ruler who seeks only peace is already defeated, for he mistakes the silence before the storm as safety. He must instead accept war as the rhythm of power, and peace as nothing more than its disguise. Thus, detach emotion, for it has no place in this endless contest. Perception must be your shield, necessity your sword, calculation your map, and survival your creed. Compassion is a story for poets, morality a comfort for priests, sincerity a luxury for friends. In the realm of power, only perception rules, and only those who shape it endure. The rest are forgotten, their names scattered like dust on the wind, their failures recorded as warnings, their compassion remembered not as virtue but as weakness. And weakness is the only crime history never forgives. The ruler must understand that every promise is a weapon, not a bond. A promise binds only those who believe in it, and belief is fragile, fleeting, easily redirected. To promise is to create expectation, to delay conflict, to buy time until necessity dictates action. The weak keep promises when it harms them. The strong break them when it serves survival. A ruler must be judged not by his fidelity to words, but by the endurance of his power. Words may decay, but authority preserved justifies every broken oath. Control rests not only in what is done, but in what is allowed to be imagined. Silence, when wielded with intention, terrifies more than speech. A ruler who withholds his voice forces others to invent his meaning, to project their fears and hopes into his absence. In this way, silence becomes an echo chamber, where the crowd convinces itself of truths you never spoke. A ruler who understands silence commands not only actions, but thoughts. Every court is a nest of serpents, each smile concealing venom, each gesture hiding calculation. Allies are allies only until interests diverge, and enemies may cloak themselves as friends when it suits them. The ruler cannot afford innocence in such an arena. He must cultivate suspicion without drowning in it, vigilance without paralysis. He must appear trusting while remaining untouchable, approachable in form, but inaccessible in substance. Those who come near him must believe they can influence him, yet never succeed beyond what he permits. To give the illusion of openness while retaining absolute control is the art of courtly survival. Power is never static. It decays when not exercised, it slips when not guarded, it diminishes when taken for granted. The ruler must treat every day as a battlefield where his command is tested. Complacency is the poison that seeps unnoticed until it collapses the foundation. Rivals wait not for weakness, but for the perception of weakness. And once that perception spreads, strength itself crumbles. To guard against this, the ruler must refresh his displays of authority, renew his image of inevitability, remind both allies and enemies that his grasp remains unshaken. Injustice, when strategically deployed, secures more stability than unmeasured fairness. Men expect fairness until it fails them. They endure injustice if it is predictable, if it sustains order, if it is applied with precision rather than whim. The ruler cannot promise justice as an absolute, for absolutes invite rebellion when broken. He must deliver it as convenience, as necessity, as a performance calculated to maintain harmony or fear. True justice does not exist in politics, only the balance of forces disguised as justice. The people crave spectacle more than substance. They wish to see their ruler triumph over enemies, to see him surrounded by grandeur, to hear of his victories and his magnanimity. Bread fills their stomachs, but spectacle fills their imagination. Without spectacle, bread is never enough. Without bread, spectacle collapses into resentment. The wise ruler feeds both, balancing sustenance with illusion, ensuring the people never see the machinery behind the performance. For once they glimpse the wires, once they taste the truth, their obedience dissolves. Secrecy is a fortress stronger than stone. What is concealed cannot be attacked directly, only guessed at. A ruler who reveals little forces his enemies to fight shadows, wasting their strength in speculation, never knowing where to strike. Yet secrecy must be crafted carefully. Too much, and suspicion turns poisonous. Too little, and vulnerability is exposed. The ruler must release fragments of himself, hints of his intentions, enough to mislead but never enough to reveal. In this game, even lies become truths if repeated with authority. History itself is a weapon. The ruler who shapes history shapes the memory of the people, and memory directs their loyalty. The deeds of rulers past can be rewritten, their failures obscured, their successes magnified, their lessons distorted into tools for present command. To control the past is to dictate the present. To dictate the present is to secure the future. A ruler who neglects history allows his enemies to write it for him, and in their version, his authority becomes a fleeting accident. Detach emotion, for it clouds the hand that must wield such weapons. Rule through perception, for perception commands men more than iron. Do not believe that compassion preserves order, it does not. Compassion may soothe for a season, but seasons change, and when famine or war arrives, it is not compassion the people will demand, but strength. They will forget your kindness, but they will never forget your weakness. To lead is not to be loved. It is to endure the hatred of some, the fear of many, the loyalty of few, and still remain unshaken upon the throne. Power does not survive on sentiment. It survives on calculation. A ruler who indulges in affection blinds himself to the iron laws that sustain his throne. He must learn to see men not as he wishes them to be, but as they are, restless, self-serving, prone to envy, swayed by appearances more than reason. To believe otherwise is to be deceived by the very illusions one is meant to control. The wise ruler recognizes that human nature does not change, only the masks do, and so he learns to exploit the constant beneath the shifting surface. Obedience is never guaranteed. It must be renewed continuously. The people obey not because they are inherently loyal, but because they are conditioned by perception, compelled by fear, and lured by advantage. Remove these elements, and loyalty vanishes like smoke. Thus, a ruler must never grow complacent in his hold upon them. He must craft ritual, law, and spectacle to remind them daily of his necessity. Authority is not inherited in the hearts of the people. It must be implanted there through repetition and reinforced through consequence. In every alliance there is a hidden transaction, and in every transaction lies the seed of betrayal. Men ally themselves not out of devotion, but because it serves their ambition or secures their safety. When either advantage fades, loyalty fades with it. To expect permanence in such arrangements is folly. The ruler must therefore enter alliances as one enters war, prepared for treachery, calculating the exit before the bond is sealed, ensuring that when betrayal comes, it harms the traitor more than the betrayed. Alliances are useful tools, but only for those who know they are temporary. Weapons of war extend beyond swords and guns. They include rumor, fear, spectacle, and silence. A whisper at the right moment can topple reputations more swiftly than an army. A well-placed silence can create more dread than 1,000 threats. A calculated display of power can prevent battles that might otherwise consume the state. To master these weapons is to fight wars without blood, to rule through shadows as effectively as through steel. The ruler who neglects them will find himself outmaneuvered by those who understand that politics itself is warfare conducted by other means. The illusion of virtue is more useful than virtue itself. To appear just is more important than to be just. To appear merciful more vital than to be merciful. To appear strong more essential than to be unyielding. Men see with their eyes, not with their reason. They judge by appearances and rarely penetrate to reality. If the ruler commands the appearance, he commands the judgment of the multitude, and their judgment secures his reign. Let the truth be hidden in the shadows, for the crowd does not seek truth, it seeks the comfort of belief. Stability is not a gift of peace, but the product of fear properly managed. A ruler who removes fear entirely will find disorder breeding in its place. A ruler who relies on fear alone will find rebellion festering in silence. The art lies in balance, fear sharp enough to deter disobedience, tempered by rewards sufficient to sustain consent. Too much fear, and men risk everything because they have nothing to lose. Too much leniency, and they risk nothing because they have everything to gain. Between these extremes lies the narrow road of enduring command. The ruler himself must live as if walking a tightrope above an abyss. To lean too far toward emotion is to fall into weakness. To lean too far toward cruelty is to fall into revolt. He must walk with balance, masking his calculations with the semblance of humanity, yet never surrendering the control that secures survival. The mask must smile even as the mind plots. The voice must soothe even as the hand prepares the dagger. To live thus is not ease, but power was never born for ease. It was born for vigilance, for struggle, for the endless maintenance of command. Detach emotion, for it cannot sustain the throne. Rule through perception, for perception shapes reality. Compassion is a luxury reserved for those who are ruled. For those who rule, it is a tool, no more sacred than the sword, no more enduring than the coin, no more trustworthy than the promise. Use it when it strengthens the hand. Discard it when it weakens it, and never confuse it with the foundation of power. For power rests not on compassion but on necessity, and necessity bows to no man's sentiment. The ruler must always remember that politics is not the realm of ideals but of survival. Those who rise to power by clinging to virtue for its own sake discover too late that virtue is a fragile shield against envy, greed, and betrayal. Virtue unarmed is trampled underfoot by those who recognize no law but necessity. Yet to reject virtue entirely is to appear monstrous, and monsters cannot rule for long without provoking resistance. Thus, the ruler must wear virtue as one wears a garment, displaying it when it pleases the eye, discarding it when it becomes a burden, always keeping it near enough to summon when the crowd demands it. Control is not the same as force. Force exhausts itself quickly, consuming men, wealth, and reputation. Control, when properly executed, sustains itself indefinitely. It is the invisible chain that binds men to obedience without their knowing they are chained. It is the silent hand that directs their choices while allowing them to believe they are free. This form of power is more enduring than armies, for it governs not just actions but beliefs, and beliefs, once embedded, are more difficult to uproot than fortresses of stone. In every decision, necessity must be the compass. Sentiment clouds, morality misleads, but necessity points to survival. To act according to necessity is to act according to the only law that power recognizes. Yet necessity itself must be cloaked, for the people resent the naked truth. They must be made to believe that actions spring from justice, mercy, or divine will, when in truth, they spring from the ruthless demands of circumstance. The ruler who masters this art will always appear principled while acting from calculation. Enemies are never eradicated, they are replaced. To believe that a victory ends opposition is to misread the nature of ambition. Each rival destroyed creates a vacancy that another will rush to fill. The ruler's task is not to end opposition but to manage it, to balance enemies against one another, to make them instruments of his stability rather than threats to it. Opposition can be useful, for it keeps fear alive and prevents complacency. A throne without enemies is a throne in decay. The ruler must not only command the present, but also anticipate the future. Today's loyalty is tomorrow's betrayal. Today's ally is tomorrow's rival. Today's silence is tomorrow's accusation. To survive, one must live ahead of the moment, to see the consequences before they ripen, to act before necessity becomes desperation. The failure to anticipate is the root of downfall, for fortune punishes those who trust her kindness. She favors those who seize her by the hair before she turns her face away. Ruthlessness, when exercised with precision, is remembered less than weakness. Men forget the blood spilled if it secures order, but they never forget the chaos unleashed by hesitation. The ruler who hesitates to strike invites greater cruelty upon himself and his state. To act decisively, even if harshly, is often the most merciful choice, for it prevents the greater suffering that indecision allows to fester. Cruelty delayed multiplies its victims. Cruelty delivered swiftly and with purpose ends rebellion before it spreads. Appearances must be curated as carefully as armies are drilled. The people do not witness your doubts, your sleepless nights, your calculations. They see only the performance you permit them to see. And in that performance lies the essence of rule. A ruler who stumbles in appearance stumbles in reality, for perception governs loyalty more than truth. Thus, every gesture, every word, every silence must be chosen with the same precision as a general choosing ground before battle. Detach emotion, for emotion leads rulers to sacrifice calculation for vanity, mercy for weakness, anger for recklessness. Rule through perception, for perception is the currency by which loyalty is bought, fear is instilled, and authority is made to appear eternal. Compassion may decorate your reign, but it cannot secure it. Only necessity can do that, and necessity is a language spoken without pity, a law written in iron, a truth that bends to no heart. The throne is not a seat of comfort, but a fortress of vigilance. To sit upon it is to accept that every glance hides intent, every hand extended in greeting may conceal a blade, every cheer may mask the murmur of discontent. Power is not held once and forever. It is defended at every moment, renewed through every decision, fortified by every display of authority. The ruler who believes his position secure without effort has already invited his downfall, for power neglected is power surrendered. Deception must be cultivated as an instrument, not a vice. Truth is too sharp, too inflexible, too naked to rule alone. Men demand illusions as they demand food, and they will revolt if denied them. A ruler who cannot deceive will be consumed by those who can, for politics is the arena where appearances hold greater weight than essence. Yet deception must be measured. Reckless lies destroy credibility. The most effective deceit is that which bends truth without breaking it, that which allows the listener to deceive himself while believing he has discovered the truth unaided. The machinery of state is built upon fear of disorder. Subjects will endure taxation, restrictions, even indignities, so long as they believe the alternative is chaos. They will despise the ruler who squeezes them too harshly, yet they will cling to him if they believe that without him, the world collapses into fire. Thus, the ruler must maintain the specter of disorder always at the edge of sight. He must remind the people of dangers within and without, so that his hand, though heavy, feels to them like protection rather than oppression. Wealth is both an ally and an enemy. It is necessary to maintain armies, to buy loyalty, to build spectacle, but it also breeds arrogance in those who possess it. The wealthy grow restless under rule, imagining themselves peers of the throne, and their ambition corrodes stability. The ruler must extract wealth without stripping it entirely, empower the rich without allowing them to rival his power, bind their fortunes to his own, so that their prosperity dies if his rule falters. For when wealth moves against him, poverty will follow. When wealth is contained, poverty will accept its lot. Punishment, when delayed, multiplies dissent. To allow betrayal to linger unanswered is to invite others to test the boundaries of disobedience. Yet punishment must not be wild, nor constant, nor petty. It must be rare enough to inspire dread, precise enough to feel inevitable, public enough to echo through memory. Men do not fear cruelty when it is common. They grow accustomed to it. They fear the cruelty they cannot predict, the punishment that falls with sudden certainty upon those who defy. It is not the number of executions that secures obedience, but the silence between them that sustains dread. Religion, belief, and myth are forces more potent than law, for they govern not merely the body but the soul. The wise ruler does not despise belief, even if he himself does not share it. He harnesses it, cloaks his decisions in its language, allows the people to see divine will in his policies, sacred meaning in his wars, eternal justice in his decrees. Men obey rulers reluctantly, but they obey gods absolutely. To appear as the hand of heaven is to make rebellion seem like blasphemy. Yet the ruler must never surrender true authority to priests. He must keep them close, useful, but never independent, for dual authority divides loyalty and weakens command. Excessive compassion weakens the bond between ruler and subject. It teaches men that the throne may be bent by pleading, that firmness can be dissolved by tears, that order can be suspended by sentiment. Once such a precedent is set, every decision becomes hostage to emotion. Better to be called hard than to be seen as bendable, for hardness commands respect, and respect breeds obedience. But softness invites manipulation, and manipulation destroys rule. Detach emotion, for it tempts the ruler to govern as a man rather than as a sovereign. Rule through perception, for men do not submit to truth, but to the truth they are made to perceive. The ruler who grasps this distinction commands not only bodies but souls, not only actions but beliefs, not only today but the shape of tomorrow. To lead without this knowledge is to reign briefly. To master it is to endure beyond the span of flesh, to linger in the memory of men as the architect of order, the weaver of fear, the sovereign of appearances. Power is a fire that consumes as much as it illuminates. Those who grasp it without caution are burned. Those who avoid it remain in darkness, and only those who learn to contain it without ever letting it die can endure. The ruler must understand that the fire cannot be shared freely. To grant too much power to others is to feed flames that will eventually engulf him. Yet to hoard power without distribution breeds resentment and rebellion. Thus, the ruler must give enough to keep others warm, while ensuring that the source of the fire remains always in his control. The courtier flatters, the soldier obeys, the merchant calculates, the priest sanctifies, and the people watch, all with motives hidden beneath their roles. To rule is to see past the surface of each. Flattery must be tested by action, obedience must be reinforced by necessity, calculation must be bound by dependence, sanctity must be harnessed by utility, and the gaze of the people must be managed by spectacle. Failure to read these motives clearly leaves the ruler prey to manipulation, and the manipulated ruler ceases to rule. Every betrayal begins with trust too freely given. To trust is not to command, it is to surrender. A ruler may use trust as performance, as bait, as illusion, but never as foundation. His true foundation must be vigilance, for vigilance sees treachery before it flowers, disloyalty before it spreads, rebellion before it ignites. He must learn to smile at those he suspects, to reward those he plans to remove, to cloak his watchfulness in apparent ease. For the enemy who believes he is unseen grows careless, and in his carelessness lies his defeat. Laws exist not to bind rulers, but to bind subjects. If the law serves the state, it must be enforced without hesitation. If it threatens the stability of power, it must be bent, concealed, or remade. Men imagine laws to be chains upon rulers, but rulers who survive know that laws are chains for others and tools for themselves. Yet the ruler must not reveal this openly, for once the people see the law as theater, they cease to respect it. He must maintain its illusion even as he bends it, for obedience depends less on justice than on the appearance of justice. Fortune favors those who move with boldness, tempered by foresight. Caution alone breeds paralysis. Recklessness alone breeds ruin. The ruler must step when others hesitate, strike when others deliberate, advance when others retreat. Yet he must also know when to feign hesitation, when to mask strength with apparent weakness, when to let rivals believe they have gained advantage only to trap them in their own overreach. Fortune is like a woman, she submits not to hesitation, but to force. Yet that force must be guided with the art of timing. Fear is a fortress more enduring than stone, yet it must not become a prison in which the ruler himself is trapped. To rule entirely by terror is to cultivate enemies in every shadow, conspirators in every silence. Fear must be balanced with the occasional gift, the moment of clemency, the token of generosity, so that men remain uncertain whether they face punishment or favor. This uncertainty secures obedience more than terror alone, for men who expect only cruelty will eventually prefer rebellion to submission. But men who live in the tension between fear and hope cling to obedience, uncertain which fate will strike them next. The greatest danger to a ruler is not the hatred of the people, but their contempt. Hatred can be managed through fear, diverted through spectacle, absorbed by scapegoats. Contempt, once rooted, cannot be undone. A ruler despised as weak, foolish, or indecisive is already dethroned in the minds of his subjects. Thus, he must guard above all his image of competence, strength, and inevitability. Better to be hated as cruel than to be mocked as inept, for cruelty may secure obedience, but ineptitude invites open defiance. Detach emotion, for it leads to vanity in triumph and despair in loss. Rule through perception, for perception ensures that even when fortune turns against you, men still believe in your inevitability. Compassion may soothe your conscience, but conscience is a private matter, while power is public. The state does not survive on the comfort of the ruler's soul, it survives on the firmness of his hand, the sharpness of his judgment, the discipline of his silence, and the mastery of his mask. The throne demands solitude even in the midst of crowds. No confidant, no lover, no ally can ever fully share the burden of rule, for to rule is to stand alone at the edge of decision where every path leads to blood or betrayal. The ruler may surround himself with advisors, yet he must remember that each counsel offered carries the weight of personal interest, each piece of advice shaped by ambition or fear. To listen is prudent, to depend is fatal. He must extract from many voices the fragments of truth, but the final choice must always be his, for responsibility cannot be delegated. To govern is to navigate the endless tension between order and ambition. Order demands stability, routine, the suppression of disruptive forces. Ambition demands expansion, conquest, the stirring of energy that threatens to destabilize. The ruler who clings only to order suffocates his state into stagnation, while the ruler who unleashes ambition without restraint burns his state into ruin. The art lies in directing ambition outward, channeling restlessness into conquest, exploration, or labor, so that the people expend their hunger in service of the state rather than against it. The ruler must master the theater of symbols. Crowns, thrones, palaces, ceremonies, armies, banners, these are not ornaments but instruments. They remind the people of hierarchy. They instill awe in the masses. They cloak the ruler's frailty in grandeur. Men obey not the man but the symbol, not the flesh but the image. A ruler who neglects symbols strips himself of the invisible authority that magnifies his presence. Without them, he is only a man among men, vulnerable to contempt, exposed to ridicule. With them, he is transformed into an idea, and ideas are harder to kill than bodies. The most dangerous illusions are those the ruler tells himself. To believe that loyalty is permanent, that fortune is constant, that the crowd loves without condition, these are deceptions more fatal than any enemy's lies. The ruler must cultivate suspicion of his own thoughts, a discipline of self-interrogation that pierces vanity and strips away comfort. He must question not only his advisors but himself, lest he fall prey to the intoxicating delusions of unchecked power. The greatest tyrannies are born not from cruelty alone, but from rulers who mistook their illusions for reality. Excessive reliance on others breeds dependency. Generals who command armies in their own name, ministers who control wealth as their personal treasure, priests who claim devotion to faith above ruler, these are threats disguised as servants. The ruler must ensure that no subject becomes too great, that no man commands loyalty independent of the throne. Divide power when it grows too concentrated, rotate offices when they become entrenched, elevate rivals to weaken one another. A state where one man besides the ruler becomes indispensable is a state already divided. Fortune humbles even the strongest. Storms scatter fleets, famine empties granaries, plague weakens armies, and fate itself mocks calculation. Yet the ruler must never display despair. To admit defeat to fortune is to surrender the perception of inevitability upon which rule depends. Even in ruin, he must present resolve. Even in loss, he must project recovery. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, he must appear unbroken. For subjects do not follow a ruler because he always triumphs. They follow him because he convinces them that, through him, their survival remains possible. Discontent, if left unaddressed, festers into rebellion. The wise ruler learns to release pressure without weakening authority. He grants small victories to the crowd, concessions that cost little but appear great, spectacles that distract from grievances, scapegoats that absorb their anger. By giving the people outlets for their restlessness, he prevents their unity against him. For scattered anger is harmless, but unified anger is fatal. To govern is not to silence discontent, but to fracture it, redirect it, and dissolve it into manageable forms. Detach emotion, for it tempts rulers to act from pride rather than calculation, from fear rather than foresight, from anger rather than necessity. Rule through perception, for perception ensures that even when the state trembles, the image of the ruler remains immovable. Compassion cannot endure the storms of fate, but discipline, vigilance, and the mastery of appearances can. The sovereign who understands this truth governs not merely for a season, but for an age, and his shadow lingers long after his body is gone. Every throne stands upon a foundation of fear, but fear alone cannot hold it forever. It must be mixed with reverence, with habit, with the dull weight of inevitability. Men must come to believe that obedience to the ruler is not a choice but a condition of existence, as natural as the rising of the Sunday. Once obedience becomes instinct, rebellion becomes unthinkable, and the throne ceases to be a man's possession and becomes instead a law of nature. To achieve this, the ruler must weave his presence into every ritual, every custom, every structure of daily life, until loyalty to him feels indistinguishable from loyalty to life itself. Rivals may be destroyed, but rivalry cannot. It is the eternal shadow cast by power. Even when no open enemy exists, ambition stirs in silence, waiting for weakness, waiting for fortune's turn. The ruler must therefore never mistake calm for peace. Calm is only the surface of waters beneath which currents move unseen. He must learn to read the ripples, to sense the hidden unrest, to strike preemptively before the current becomes a storm. Inaction in the face of ambition is surrender. Only vigilance and decisive force prevent it from consuming the throne. The people's memory is short, but their instincts are long. They forget kindness quickly, they forget cruelty slowly, but they never forget weakness. Weakness once revealed cannot be erased, no matter how many victories follow. A ruler who falters publicly invites permanent doubt, and doubt is the seed from which rebellion grows. Thus, he must never expose his fragility to the multitude. His doubts, his fears, his hesitations must remain hidden behind the mask of command. The ruler may tremble in solitude, but before the eyes of the people he must always stand unshaken. Diplomacy is war by subtler means. Treaties, gifts, and words of peace are not bonds but tactics, designed to buy time, to divide enemies, to deceive rivals. To trust in the permanence of alliances is to mistake the battlefield for a sanctuary. Alliances endure only so long as they serve mutual interest, and interest shifts with fortune. A ruler must use diplomacy as one uses a shield, useful when necessary, but never mistaken for security. The sword must always be ready, for the day will come when the shield shatters. Mercy is a currency more valuable when scarce. Too much mercy devalues itself. It breeds expectation instead of gratitude. The man who receives mercy believes he earned it, while the crowd who witnesses it believes it can demand it. But when mercy is rare, when it appears as a favor beyond calculation, it inspires awe and binds loyalty. The ruler must therefore give mercy sparingly, never from weakness, always from strength, so that its effect multiplies rather than diminishes. The ruler must also master the rhythm of concealment and revelation. To reveal everything is to leave no mystery, and a ruler without mystery is a ruler diminished. To conceal everything is to breed suspicion too corrosive to endure. The art lies in revealing fragments, glimpses, gestures that satisfy curiosity without unveiling truth. Mystery sustains authority, for men revere what they cannot fully understand. Let them believe they know the ruler, but never let them truly know him. Violence is not the opposite of politics. It is its companion. Every law rests upon the silent threat of force, every decree upon the belief that disobedience carries punishment. A ruler who neglects this truth invites mockery, for laws without teeth are mere words. Yet violence must not be constant, for constant violence breeds numbness and rebellion. It must be swift, decisive, and symbolic, an example that instructs all, a reminder of the unseen power that waits behind every command. Detach emotion, for emotion bends rulers to the weight of personal desire, while rule demands the sacrifice of desire to necessity. Rule through perception, for perception builds walls stronger than iron, binds men more firmly than chains, and carries authority further than armies. Compassion may be remembered in stories, but in the reality of power, it is perception that endures, necessity that governs, and calculation that preserves the state. To forget this is to reign briefly. To master it is to rule beyond the grave, in memory, in fear, in the echo of an unbroken name. No ruler can escape the weight of time, yet the wise ruler bends time to his advantage. He knows that men live in moments, impatient, restless, easily distracted, while power is secured by foresight stretched across years. To govern is to see beyond the urgency of the hour, to anticipate the crisis that lies hidden in prosperity, to prepare for famine in the season of abundance, to prepare for revolt in the season of calm. Time punishes those who drift with its current. It rewards those who row against it with vigilance and design. Every state rests on fear of the external and fear of the internal. External enemies bind the people together under the promise of protection. Internal enemies remind the ruler that obedience must be enforced. A ruler who lacks external enemies must create them, for a people without an enemy turn their discontent inward toward the throne itself. War, whether real or imagined, focuses ambition outward and transforms unrest into loyalty. To govern without enemies is to risk being devoured by the very peace one has secured. Men are moved more by spectacle than by substance. A victory paraded through the streets has more weight than a treaty signed in silence. A monument erected in the city square endures longer in memory than a reform passed in council. Appearances write themselves into the imagination of the people, while reality fades into obscurity. The ruler must therefore craft his victories into theater, his policies into stories, his image into legend, for power is remembered not in the detail of its acts, but in the spectacle of its symbols. The instruments of control are not limited to the sword or the law. Rumor, suspicion, and fear are often sharper than steel. A whisper that undermines a rival, a rumor that magnifies the ruler's power, a suspicion that keeps conspirators from trusting one another. These are weapons that cut without being seen. Blood spilled is visible to all, but fear whispered in silence corrodes from within, weakening enemies before the first strike is ever delivered. The ruler must avoid the intoxication of triumph. Victory blinds as surely as defeat destroys. In victory, men grow careless, their vigilance dulls, their arrogance swells. A ruler who believes himself invincible because of triumph is already vulnerable, for fortune delights in humbling the arrogant. He must accept triumph with the same cold calculation with which he endures loss, never mistaking momentary success for permanent security. Triumph is only another stage of danger, disguised in the cloak of celebration. The crowd is never loyal to the man, only to the image he represents. They will chant his name today and curse it tomorrow if perception shifts. To secure their loyalty, the ruler must tie his image to forces greater than himself: order, destiny, divine will, the survival of the state. When the ruler becomes a symbol of something beyond the reach of ordinary men, he ceases to be judged as a man and becomes revered as necessity. It is not the man who endures, but the symbol, and the wise ruler makes himself indistinguishable from it. Secrecy is strength, but isolation is weakness. The ruler must never reveal all, but he must also never lose touch with the world he governs. To live only within the walls of the palace is to breathe stale air, to hear only the lies of courtiers, to mistake flattery for truth. He must place eyes and ears everywhere, messengers among the people, informants among allies, spies among enemies. To govern without knowledge is to stumble blindfolded through a field of knives. Information is the lifeblood of power, and ignorance its death. Detach emotion, for emotion enslaves rulers to impulses that fortune exploits. Rule through perception, for perception grants a stability stronger than truth itself. Compassion cannot bind men forever, but necessity and fear will hold them as long as the ruler remains vigilant. The state is not preserved by goodness but by clarity, not by sentiment but by foresight, not by love but by discipline. To forget this is to fall with the countless rulers whose names are dust. To remember it is to endure as a shadow across centuries, feared, obeyed, and unforgotten. In the end, every throne is temporary, every empire finite, every ruler mortal. Flesh withers, monuments erode, armies dissolve, but the impression left upon the minds of men outlives all. The wise ruler does not chase immortality in marble or in verse, for both are at the mercy of time. He seeks instead to carve himself into perception, to shape the memory of his reign so deeply that even when his body is gone, his presence lingers as necessity, as fear, as legend. For power survives not in stone, but in belief, and belief, once forged, can echo beyond centuries. Detach emotion, for emotion fades with the body. Rule through perception, for perception endures like shadow. Compassion, when remembered, softens into stories that serve poets. Perception, when mastered, hardens into laws that govern states. The ruler who grasps this truth walks alone, but he walks above the crowd, directing their gaze, commanding their loyalty, bending their instincts. He becomes less a man and more a mask, less a body and more a force, less a presence in time and more a necessity written into the order of the world. Thus, when the end arrives, as it does for all, the question is not whether the ruler has lived with mercy or cruelty, with love or with fear, but whether he has endured. For endurance is the only justice the world grants to those who govern. And the ruler who understood perception, who mastered necessity, who stood unbroken by betrayal and unshaken by fortune, does not die as a man alone. He becomes memory, he becomes example, he becomes warning, he becomes myth. This is the fate of rule, to walk in solitude, to command without compassion, to shape the world through perception rather than truth. To accept the burden of power is to abandon the comfort of sentiment. To govern is to endure, and to endure is to live beyond the grave, not in the warmth of affection, but in the cold permanence of fear, respect, and remembrance.